You're sitting on your couch after a long day, and a warm weight settles against your leg. Maybe it's a dog resting their head on your knee, or a cat curling into that perfect circle of fur and contentment. Without thinking, your hand reaches down to stroke soft fur, and you feel your shoulders drop, your breathing slow. Your entire body relax into this simple moment of connection. It's such an ordinary experience that we rarely stop to wonder about it. But when did this start? How did we go from wary competitors in the wild to companions who share our homes, our beds, our daily lives? Welcome back to Midnight Deep Dive. Or if you're new here, welcome to our cozy corner of the internet, where we explore the fascinating stories behind everyday experiences. Wherever you are right now, I'm so glad you've decided to join me. Tonight, we're exploring one of humanity's oldest and most meaningful relationships, our bond with the animals we invite into our lives. We'll trace the journey from ancient wolves circling campfires to the estimated 470 million dogs and 370 million cats sharing human homes today. We'll discover how pets have shaped human civilization, how we've shaped them, and what science reveals about why this relationship feels so essential to so many of us. So get comfortable, let the day's weight begin to lift, and join me as we journey back thousands of years to discover how wild animals became our closest companions. Imagine the world 15,000 years ago, though some evidence suggests this relationship might stretch back twice that far. Humans are hunter-gatherers, moving with the seasons, following game, gathering what the land provides. They're not apex predators yet, not the dominant species they'll become. They're just one animal among many, trying to survive in a world full of dangers. And among those dangers are wolves, pack hunters whose territories overlap with human ranging grounds, who sometimes compete for the same prey, who occasionally view humans themselves as potential meals. But something remarkable begins to happen at the edges of human camps. Some wolves, perhaps the bolder ones, or maybe the more desperate ones struggling to survive in their packs, start lingering near human settlements. There are scraps there, bones with bits of meat still clinging to them, discarded remains from human meals. It's easier than hunting, less risky than competing with their own pack for kills. The humans notice these wolves, of course. At first, they probably drive them away, throw stones, shout threats. Wolves are dangerous. Everyone knows this. Yet gradually, some humans begin to see advantages to these scavenging wolves. They bark when other predators approach in the night. They alert the camp to danger. Their keen senses detect threats before human awareness registers them. And perhaps most importantly, their presence keeps other, more aggressive wolves at a distance. The wolves hanging around the camp have a stake in protecting it now. It's where their food comes from. This is the beginning, though it's not yet domestication in any intentional sense. It's mutual tolerance evolving into mutual benefit. The wolves, who are less aggressive, who can control their fear of humans enough to stay close to the camps, who have temperaments that allow them to coexist with another predator species, these wolves survive better. They eat more consistently. They produce more offspring. And crucially, those offspring inherit not just their parents' physical traits, but their behavioral traits too. Tolerance of humans, reduced aggression, the ability to read human signals, all of these get passed down through generations. The humans, meanwhile, begin to notice differences among these camp-following wolves. Some are more useful than others. Some are better at alerting to danger. Some are less likely to snap at children. And here's where human selection begins to play a role, though still unconsciously at first. The wolves that are most useful, that integrate best with human life, are the ones humans tolerate more, feed more consistently, perhaps even protect from other predators. They have better survival and reproduction rates. The most aggressive wolves, the ones that threaten children or steal too much food, get driven away or killed. Over hundreds, then thousands of generations, something extraordinary happens. These wolves change, their skulls shorten slightly. Their teeth become smaller. Their ears, which stood upright and alert in their wolf ancestors, begin to flop. Some develop coat colors and patterns never seen in wild wolves. Spots, patches, colors beyond the typical wolf grays and browns. Most remarkably, their behavior transforms. They become attuned to human communication in ways no other animal matches. They learn to follow human pointing gestures, something even our closest genetic relatives, the chimpanzees, struggle with. They develop the ability to read human facial expressions, to distinguish between a smile and a scowl, to recognize individual humans and remember their interactions. Archaeological evidence for this transformation comes from burial sites scattered across Europe, Asia, and eventually the Americas. At a site in Bonn-Oberkassel, Germany, dating back about 14,000 years, archaeologists found the graves of two humans buried with a puppy. Not a wolf, a puppy. The bone structure shows this was a young dog, and crucially, analysis of its teeth suggests this puppy had been sick, possibly with canine distemper. It survived to about 7 months old, which means someone cared for it through its illness. You don't nurse a sick wolf puppy, unless that animal means something to you beyond its utility. Similar discoveries appear across the ancient world. In Siberia, a 9,000-year-old grave contains a human buried with a dog, the human's hand positioned on the dog's shoulder in what appears to be a gesture of affection. In Israel, a 12,000-year-old burial shows an elderly human with their hand cradling a puppy. These aren't working animals disposed of when they die. These are companions, mourned and honored in death, buried in ways that suggest emotional bonds remarkably similar to what pet owners feel today. But here's what's fascinating. This process of domestication wasn't primarily driven by human intention, at least not at first. Modern genetic studies have revealed that dogs didn't descend from one carefully selected wolf population that humans deliberately domesticated. Instead, the evidence suggests multiple domestication events, possibly occurring in different parts of the world simultaneously. Wolves in different regions, through this process of mutual benefit and natural selection for tameness, began transforming into dogs independently. The famous Russian fox experiment, begun in 1959 by geneticist Dmitry Belyaev, demonstrated how quickly this transformation can occur. Belyaev bred silver foxes, selecting only for one trait, tameness. Foxes that showed less fear and aggression toward humans were bred together. Their offspring were tested, and again, only the tamest were selected for breeding. Within just 10 generations, remarkable changes appeared. The foxes' ears began to flop, their tails curled, their coat colors diversified. They began to whine and bark in ways wild foxes never do. By the 40th generation, these foxes sought human contact, wagged their tails when approached, and behaved remarkably like domestic dogs. What Belyaev's experiment revealed was that selecting for tameness doesn't just change behavior. It changes the entire developmental process, affecting hormone levels, neural development, and physical characteristics. The floppy ears, the varied coat colors, the shortened snouts. All of these physical changes come along as byproducts of selecting for reduced aggression and increased tolerance of humans. It's called domestication syndrome, and it appears in every species humans have domesticated, from dogs to pigs to foxes. So those first proto-dogs emerging 15,000 to 30,000 years ago weren't created through careful breeding programs. They created themselves, in a sense, by adapting to a new ecological niche, living alongside humans. And humans, recognizing the benefits these animals provided, encouraged the process through tolerance and eventually through active selection. As human societies grew more complex, so did their relationships with dogs. When humans transitioned from hunter-gatherer lifestyles to agricultural settlements about 10,000 years ago, dogs' roles expanded. They guarded livestock from predators. They helped control pest animals that threatened grain stores. They assisted in hunting. Different human groups began selecting dogs for different purposes, creating the beginnings of breed diversity. Herding dogs evolved in pastoral societies. Hunting dogs diversified into those that tracked, those that retrieved, those that went to ground after burrowing prey. Guard dogs became larger and more protective. Lap dogs emerged in wealthy households, where companionship rather than work was the primary value. By the time written history begins, dogs are everywhere in human societies, thoroughly integrated into daily life. Ancient Egyptians mummified beloved dogs and buried them with honors. Ancient Greeks and Romans wrote about their hunting dogs and guard dogs with affection and admiration. Chinese imperial courts bred tiny lapdogs. Across the ancient world, dogs had become what they remain today. Our oldest companions, the first wild animal to look at humans and see not competitors or prey, but partners in survival and eventually friends. While dogs were transforming from wolves through active partnership with humans, cats took a remarkably different path to domestication. If the dog's story is one of mutual cooperation and selection, the cat's story is one of self-domestication, opportunism, and a relationship that even today maintains a fascinating ambiguity. Cats domesticated themselves, and they did it in their own time, on their own terms, in ways that reflect the independent nature that cat owners know so well. The story begins about 10,000 years ago in the Fertile Crescent, that arc of land stretching from Egypt through the Middle East, where humans first began cultivating crops and storing grain. This agricultural revolution created a new ecological opportunity. Concentrated food sources in the form of grain stores that attracted rodents in enormous numbers. Mice and rats thrived in these early agricultural settlements, and where rodents thrived, small wildcats followed. The Near Eastern wildcat, Felis sylvestris libica, was a solitary hunter about the size of a modern house cat, with a striped tabby coat and a temperament far less social than dogs. These cats didn't seek out human company. They sought out the mice and rats that human grain stores attracted. The humans, meanwhile, had every reason to tolerate these cats. A good mouser could protect grain stores from significant losses. Unlike dogs, cats required no feeding or training. They simply showed up, did their job, and maintained their independence. This relationship of mutual convenience persisted for thousands of years before anything resembling true domestication occurred. Genetic studies show that domestic cats share remarkably similar DNA to their wild ancestors, far more similar than domestic dogs are to wolves. This suggests that the selective pressure that transformed wolves into dogs, that intense selection for tameness and human cooperation, barely touched cats. They remained essentially wild animals who chose to live near humans. The transformation from tolerated pest control to beloved companion appears to have occurred most dramatically in ancient Egypt, where cats achieved a status unique in human history. By around 4,000 years ago, cats in Egypt had transitioned from useful animals to sacred beings. The goddess Bastet, originally depicted as a fierce lioness, gradually transformed into a domestic cat, representing protection, fertility, and the gentler aspects of feline nature. Temples to Bastet housed thousands of cats, cared for by priests, venerated by worshippers. Egyptian families kept cats in their homes, not primarily as mousers, though they certainly served that function, but as beloved members of the household. When a family cat died, household members would shave their eyebrows in mourning. Cats were mummified with the same care given to human remains, wrapped in linen, sometimes provided with mummified mice for the afterlife. Archaeological excavations have uncovered entire cat cemeteries, with hundreds of thousands of mummified cats buried with honor. But Egyptian reverence for cats had a darker side that reveals the complexities of ancient human-animal relationships. Many of these mummified cats weren't beloved pets who died natural deaths. They were cats bred in temple catteries, specifically for sacrifice and mummification, killed young to be sold as religious offerings. Modern X-ray analysis of cat mummies reveals broken necks and other evidence of deliberate killing. This reminds us that ancient relationships with animals, even venerated ones, differed significantly from modern pet keeping. Egyptian law protected cats fiercely. Killing a cat, even accidentally, could result in death penalty. When an Egyptian building caught fire, people would reportedly prioritize saving cats over property. This protection was partly religious, partly practical. Cats were economically valuable, but it also suggests genuine affection. Egyptian art shows cats under chairs at feasts, wearing jeweled collars, playing with toys. These are images of companions, not just working animals. From Egypt, domestic cats spread around the Mediterranean world, traveling on merchant ships where they served as rodent control, but also as companions to lonely sailors. The Romans adopted cats enthusiastically, spreading them throughout their empire. A Roman villa wasn't complete without a cat to protect grain stores and provide companionship. Cats appear in Roman mosaics, often depicted in homes, sometimes playing or being fed by hand. Then came one of the darkest chapters in the history of human-feline relations, medieval Europe's persecution of cats, particularly black cats. As Christianity spread and the Church worked to eliminate pagan beliefs, cats, especially black cats, became associated with witchcraft and devil worship. Pope Gregory IX issued a papal declaration in 1233 that essentially condemned cats as agents of Satan. What followed was centuries of systematic cat killing across Europe. Cats were tortured in public spectacles. They were burned alive in wicker cages. They were thrown from towers. In some towns, festivals involved setting cats on fire as entertainment. The persecution was driven by superstition and religious fervor, but it had catastrophic practical consequences. As cat populations plummeted, rodent populations exploded. And when the Black Death arrived in the 14th century, carried by fleas on rats, it found a Europe with far too few cats to control the rat population. The plague killed up to half of Europe's human population in some regions, and the earlier persecution of cats was likely a contributing factor. Gradually, attitudes shifted again. The practical value of cats became undeniable, and the worst of the persecution ended. By the Renaissance, cats were returning to homes and cities in large numbers. Maritime exploration further spread cats around the globe, as every ship needed ratters for long voyages. Cats reached the Americas, Australia, and remote islands, often becoming invasive species that dramatically affected local ecosystems, but also becoming integrated into human settlements worldwide. The Victorian era marked another transformation in human-cat relationships. As with dogs, the Victorians became obsessed with breeding cats for appearance rather than function. The first cat show was held at London's Crystal Palace in 1871, featuring cats judged on physical characteristics. Breeds that had developed naturally in different regions, like the Turkish Angora, Persian, Siamese, were formalized and standardized. New breeds were created through selective breeding, emphasizing particular physical traits. This Victorian cat fancy established the modern pet cat as we know it. Cats transitioned from animals valued primarily for their working ability to animals valued for their companionship and aesthetic qualities. The explosion of breeds, over 70 recognized today, created cats with flat faces, folded ears, unusual coat patterns, sizes ranging from tiny to enormous. Some of these breeding choices have created health problems, similar to issues in purebred dogs, raising ethical questions about whether appearance should be prioritized over animal welfare. What's remarkable about cats compared to dogs is how little they've actually changed through domestication. They're still solitary hunters at heart. They still retain most of the behaviors and instincts of their wild ancestors. A domestic cat released into the wild can often survive, hunting and fending for itself, something few domestic dogs could accomplish. Cats haven't developed the same intense attunement to human communication that dogs have. They don't follow pointing gestures as reliably. They don't seek approval the way dogs do. Yet modern research reveals that cats are far more attuned to humans than we previously thought. They recognize their owners' voices and choose whether to respond. They learn to manipulate humans through specific vocalizations, like the urgent meow that mimics a baby's cry and triggers nurturing responses. They form genuine attachments to their humans, showing distress when separated and comfort when reunited. The old stereotype of cats as aloof and unaffectionate doesn't match what science and cat owners know. Cats bond deeply, they just express it differently than dogs. The global population of domestic cats today exceeds 600 million, making them one of the most successful mammals on Earth. They live on every continent except Antarctica. They're the most popular pet in many countries, including the United States. They've achieved this success while changing remarkably little from their wild ancestors, while maintaining their independence, while domesticating themselves on their own terms. It's a testament to the cat's adaptability and to the appeal of an animal that offers companionship without demanding the constant attention dogs require. While dogs and cats dominate modern pet keeping, humans throughout history have invited an astonishing variety of animals into their lives as companions. From ancient Rome to medieval Europe to Victorian England and beyond, people have kept birds, rabbits, ferrets, fish, reptiles, and creatures so exotic they stretched the definition of pet beyond recognition. These relationships reveal how human ideas about companionship, status, and our place in the natural world have evolved across cultures and centuries. Let's start with birds, which might be the third oldest category of pet after dogs and cats. Evidence suggests that ancient peoples kept parrots and other birds as companions over 2,000 years ago. Ancient Romans were particularly fond of pet birds. Wealthy Roman households kept elaborate aviaries with exotic species imported from across the empire. Parrots commanded especially high prices due to their ability to mimic human speech, which Romans found endlessly entertaining. But Romans didn't just keep birds for their beauty or vocal abilities. They formed genuine attachments to them. The poet Catullus wrote a famous elegy for a pet sparrow belonging to his lover, mourning the small bird's death with the kind of emotional depth we'd recognize in modern pet memorials. Pliny the Elder documented Romans teaching starlings and ravens to speak, rewarding them with food, mourning them when they died. These were clearly companions, not just decorative animals. Medieval and Renaissance Europe continued the tradition of pet bird keeping, though it took on new dimensions. Songbirds like canaries and nightingales were kept in elaborate cages in wealthy homes, prized for their music. Falconry, while technically a sport rather than pet keeping, created deep bonds between falconers and their birds. A well-trained hunting falcon was worth a fortune, and treated with the kind of care and affection modern people lavish on dogs. The birds were hooded, dressed, and carried on the gloved hand, becoming status symbols and genuine companions. Parrots reached Europe via trade routes from Africa, India, and eventually the Americas, and they became symbols of exotic wealth. A parrot could cost as much as an enslaved human, and owning one signaled access to global trade networks and disposable wealth. But beyond status, people genuinely bonded with these long-lived, intelligent birds. Historical accounts describe parrots as beloved household members, free to roam homes, known for their distinct personalities and their sometimes troublesome behaviors. Rabbits tell a different story of domestication. Originally native to the Iberian Peninsula, rabbits were kept by Romans in walled gardens called leperaria, initially for meat production. But as rabbits were bred in captivity over generations, selection for tameness created animals progressively more suitable as companions. Medieval monks kept rabbits in monastery gardens, breeding them for food, but also noticing the appeal of the tamer, more attractive individuals. By the Victorian era, rabbits had fully transitioned from livestock to pets for many owners. The British developed fancy rabbit breeding, creating breeds with distinctive appearances. Lop ears, distinctive colors and patterns, unusual fur textures. Rabbits became children's pets, gentle enough to handle, requiring less space and care than dogs. The Easter Bunny tradition, which has murky origins but was solidified in Victorian times, reflected and reinforced rabbits' status as symbols of innocence and suitable companions for children. Ferrets occupy a particularly interesting niche in pet history. These domesticated polecats were bred specifically for hunting, used to drive rabbits and rats from their burrows since at least Roman times and possibly earlier. Unlike dogs and cats, ferrets never really transitioned away from their working role until very recently. Medieval and Renaissance Europeans kept ferrets primarily as skilled hunters, though historical accounts suggest people became fond of their individual ferrets. Queen Elizabeth I of England reportedly kept ferrets, and they appear in Renaissance art, sometimes shown on leashes, sometimes held in arms. But ferrets remained relatively rare as pure companion animals until the 20th century, when their playful, curious nature and suitability for apartment living made them increasingly popular pets. Today's pet ferrets are descended from these working animals, bred for hunting instincts that translate into energetic, mischievous behavior in domestic settings. Guinea pigs have an even more unusual history. Domesticated by indigenous peoples in the Andes region of South America over 3,000 years ago, guinea pigs were primarily food animals, but also held spiritual significance. When Spanish conquistadors encountered them in the 16th century, they brought guinea pigs back to Europe, where they became fashionable pets among the wealthy. Queen Elizabeth I kept guinea pigs, and they spread among European nobility as exotic curiosities. What's interesting about guinea pigs is that they never had a working role in European society. They were too small for practical purposes, and their status as former livestock made them unsuitable for elite households' dinner tables. They survived as pets purely on their appeal, their gentle nature, their soft fur, their friendly squeaking vocalizations. By the Victorian era, guinea pigs had become popular children's pets, a role they maintain today. Victorian England deserves special mention for its explosion of pet keeping across social classes and species. The Victorians were obsessed with collecting, categorizing, and displaying the natural world. This impulse extended to pet keeping on an unprecedented scale. The rising middle class, with new disposable income and leisure time, embraced pets enthusiastically. Pet shops proliferated in London and other cities, selling everything from traditional dogs and cats to more exotic offerings. Victorians kept pet hedgehogs, supposedly useful for controlling insects, but also valued as unique companions. They kept pet monkeys, often dressed in tiny clothes and taught tricks for entertainment. They maintained elaborate aquariums, a hobby that became a genuine Victorian craze after the invention of the balanced aquarium made it possible to keep fish alive long-term in home tanks. The first public aquarium opened in London in 1853, and within years, home aquariums were fashionable in middle-class and wealthy homes. The Victorian exotic pet trade had a dark side that we'd find appalling today. Rare animals were imported from colonies around the world with little concern for their welfare or conservation status. Mortality rates during transport were horrific. Animals unsuited for captivity were kept in inappropriate conditions because they were novel or fashionable. Monkeys, parrots, even young lions and other large cats were sold as pets to people with no knowledge of their needs. This Victorian excess eventually prompted some of the first animal welfare movements and laws. The Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, founded in 1824, initially focused on working animals, but expanded its concern to pet welfare. Gradually, attitudes shifted toward understanding that exotic wild animals don't make suitable pets, that animal welfare matters, and that some creatures should remain in their natural habitats. The 20th century saw pet keeping become thoroughly democratized. What was once a luxury for the wealthy became accessible to working-class families. Dogs and cats remained dominant, but the variety of other pets expanded to include hamsters, gerbils, mice, rats, all domesticated as pets primarily in the 20th century. Reptiles gained popularity as pets starting in the 1970s and 80s, with species like bearded dragons, ball pythons, and leopard geckos bred specifically for the pet trade. Today's pet keeping reflects both ancient traditions and modern innovations. We keep descendants of the same species ancient peoples kept: dogs, cats, birds, rabbits, but with far more knowledge about their needs and welfare. We've added species our ancestors never imagined as companions. Tropical fish in precisely maintained reef tanks, tarantulas and other arthropods, even microorganisms in educational settings. The variety reflects our desire to connect with the natural world, to care for something, to have companionship in forms as diverse as human interests themselves. What all these animals share, from ancient Roman parrots to modern pet rats, is that humans have found ways to bond with them, to see them as individuals rather than just examples of their species, to incorporate them into our daily lives and emotional worlds. The menagerie of human history reveals something fundamental about our species. We're social creatures who extend our capacity for relationship beyond our own kind, who find meaning in caring for others, who have invited the natural world into our homes in the form of companions who share our lives and sometimes our hearts. There's a moment that happens between humans and their pets that feels almost magical. You're having a terrible day, everything's gone wrong, and you walk through your door feeling defeated. Your dog looks up at you, tail beginning to wag, or your cat emerges from wherever cats go during the day and winds around your legs. And something shifts inside you. The weight doesn't disappear, but it becomes bearable. You're not alone. Someone is genuinely happy to see you, and that simple fact matters more than you'd expect. For most of human history, we've understood this bond intuitively, through lived experience and observation. But in recent decades, science has begun to unravel the biological mechanisms underlying the human-animal bond, and what researchers have discovered is remarkable. The connection we feel with our pets isn't just emotional sentiment. It's written in our neurochemistry, our hormones, our evolutionary history. The bond between humans and animals has measurable effects on our bodies and brains that help explain why pets have remained such constant companions throughout human civilization. Let's start with oxytocin, often called the love hormone or the bonding hormone. Oxytocin is a neurotransmitter that plays crucial roles in social bonding, trust, and attachment. It's released during childbirth and nursing, facilitating the mother-infant bond. It surges during positive social interactions between humans, and remarkably, it's also released when humans and their pets interact positively with each other. A groundbreaking study published in 2015 examined what happens when dogs and their owners gaze at each other. The researchers measured oxytocin levels in both species before and after periods of interaction that included mutual gazing, those moments when human and dog look into each other's eyes. They found that oxytocin levels increased in both species, and crucially, the increase was correlated. Dogs whose owners gazed at them more showed higher oxytocin increases, and those dogs' owners also showed higher oxytocin increases. It was a positive feedback loop of bonding chemistry. This is extraordinary when you think about it. Oxytocin-based bonding between species is almost unheard of in nature. The system evolved to facilitate bonding between members of the same species, particularly between parents and offspring. Yet dogs have somehow hijacked this ancient bonding mechanism, creating a neurochemical connection with humans that mirrors the parent-child bond. When you look at your dog and feel that surge of affection, when your dog gazes back with what looks like devotion, you're both experiencing real, measurable changes in brain chemistry that promote attachment and trust. Cats, interestingly, show similar effects, though they've been studied less extensively. Research suggests that cats also release oxytocin during positive interactions with their owners, and that owners experience the same hormonal response. The mutual gaze effect may be less pronounced in cats. They're less prone to sustained eye contact, but the bonding chemistry appears to function similarly. This suggests that the capacity to form these bonds might be inherent in the human side of the equation, available to be activated by various species who have learned to interact with us appropriately. But oxytocin is just part of the story. Interacting with pets affects multiple biological systems in ways that promote well-being. Studies have shown that petting a dog or cat can lower blood pressure and heart rate, reduce levels of cortisol, the stress hormone, and increase levels of serotonin and dopamine, neurotransmitters associated with pleasure and well-being. These aren't subtle effects. They're measurable changes that occur within minutes of positive interaction with a pet. The cardiovascular benefits of pet ownership have been particularly well documented. Multiple studies have found that dog owners have lower blood pressure, lower cholesterol levels, and reduced risk of heart disease compared to non-owners. Some research suggests that heart attack survivors who own dogs have significantly better survival rates than those who don't. While these effects aren't purely due to the bond itself, there's also the factor of increased exercise with dogs. The emotional support and stress reduction that pets provide appears to have genuine protective effects on cardiovascular health. The stress reduction effects of pets are particularly fascinating. Numerous studies have shown that people perform better on stressful tasks when a pet is present than when they're alone, or even when a supportive human friend is present. One study had participants perform stressful mental arithmetic while their blood pressure and heart rate were monitored. Participants showed the lowest stress responses when their pet was present, moderate responses when a friend was present, and highest responses when alone. The researchers suggested that pets provide support without judgment. They won't think less of you if you fail, which reduces the social evaluative threat that humans naturally create. From an evolutionary psychology perspective, our attraction to pets makes sense even if it seems paradoxical at first. Humans evolved as highly social creatures who depend on relationships for survival and well-being. We're also intensely visual creatures who rely on facial features and expressions to assess others. Many of the species we keep as pets, particularly young ones, display what are called baby schema features. Large eyes relative to face size, round faces, soft features. These characteristics trigger nurturing responses in human brains because they resemble human infants. This explains why we find puppies and kittens almost irresistibly cute. It's not accidental. The features that make them adorable are the same features that evolved to make human babies compelling to adult caregivers. Dogs in particular have been shaped by domestication to retain juvenile features into adulthood more than wolves do. Adult dogs have proportionally larger eyes, rounder faces, and more expressive features than wolves. They've essentially become permanent puppies in some respects, maintaining features that trigger human caregiving instincts. But there's more to the bond than just cuteness triggering parental instincts. Pets also fulfill genuine social needs. They provide companionship that mitigates loneliness, a significant health risk in modern societies where social isolation is increasingly common. They offer unconditional positive regard, greeting their owners with enthusiasm regardless of the day's successes or failures. They create structure and routine, requiring care at regular intervals, which can be particularly valuable for people struggling with depression or motivation. Perhaps most remarkably, pets can read human emotions with surprising accuracy. Dogs are particularly skilled at this, likely due to their long coevolution with humans. Research has shown that dogs can distinguish between happy and angry human facial expressions, that they respond differently to different emotional tones in human voices, and that they can even detect changes in human body odor associated with stress or illness. Some dogs can be trained to detect seizures before they occur, to alert to dangerous drops in blood sugar for diabetics, or to recognize the early signs of panic attacks in their owners. This emotional attunement isn't one-sided. Humans are remarkably good at reading pet emotions too, at least for species we're familiar with. Dog owners can accurately identify whether a bark signals playfulness, aggression, or distress. Cat owners learn to distinguish between different types of meows and purrs. We read body language, facial expressions, and subtle behavioral cues to understand what our pets need and feel. This mutual emotional intelligence creates genuine two-way communication, limited perhaps, but real. The mirror neuron system in human brains likely plays a role in this emotional connection. Mirror neurons fire both when we perform an action and when we observe someone else performing that action. They're thought to be crucial for empathy, allowing us to simulate others' experiences in our own minds. Research suggests that mirror neurons activate when we observe animals as well as humans, allowing us to empathize with pets, to feel distress when they're distressed, pleasure when they're happy. There's also an element of what psychologists call biophilia. The hypothesis proposed by E.O. Wilson that humans have an innate tendency to seek connections with nature and other forms of life. This tendency evolved because understanding and connecting with other living things was crucial for survival. Knowing which plants were edible, which animals were dangerous, how ecosystems functioned. In modern environments where many people have limited contact with nature, pets may fulfill this deep-seated need to connect with non-human life. The therapeutic potential of the human-animal bond has led to the development of entire fields of animal-assisted therapy and emotional support animals. Therapy dogs visit hospitals, nursing homes, schools, and disaster sites, providing comfort that measurably reduces anxiety and improves mood. Equine-assisted therapy uses interactions with horses to treat conditions from autism to PTSD. The physical presence of animals, their non-judgmental acceptance, and the requirement that humans be present and attentive to interact with them creates therapeutic conditions difficult to replicate otherwise. What emerges from all this research is a picture of the human-animal bond as deeply rooted in our biology and psychology. We're not simply projecting human qualities onto animals or anthropomorphizing our pets when we feel love for them. We're experiencing genuine emotional and physiological bonds facilitated by ancient neurochemical systems that have been shaped by thousands of years of coevolution. The love you feel when your pet greets you at the door isn't foolish or irrational. It's a real connection, measurable in hormones and heart rate, meaningful in lived experience, and valuable in its effects on health and well-being. Long before modern medicine documented the health benefits of pet ownership, ancient peoples recognized that animals could serve healing roles in human society. The ancient Greeks kept dogs in temples dedicated to Asclepius, the god of healing, believing the dogs possessed therapeutic powers. The animals would lick the wounds of the ill and injured, and while we now understand this had more to do with the mild antiseptic properties of canine saliva than divine intervention, the recognition that animals could promote healing was already present. Medieval monasteries kept cats and dogs not just for practical purposes, but because their presence was thought to comfort the sick and ease the dying. Florence Nightingale, the founder of modern nursing, observed that small pets helped reduce anxiety in patients, and she recommended their presence in recovery environments. But it wasn't until the mid-20th century that the therapeutic role of animals began to be studied systematically, revealing health benefits that span from physical to psychological to social domains. The story of modern animal-assisted therapy often begins with a man named Boris Levinson, a child psychologist in 1960s New York. Levinson accidentally discovered the therapeutic potential of animals when a withdrawn, uncommunicative child arrived early for an appointment and encountered Levinson's dog, Jingles. The child, who had been resistant to therapy, immediately began interacting with the dog. Levinson decided to let Jingles remain in the room during the session, and the child gradually began speaking, first to the dog, then with the dog as an intermediary, and eventually directly to Levinson. Intrigued, Levinson began intentionally incorporating Jingles into therapy sessions with troubled children. He found that the dog's presence reduced anxiety, encouraged communication, and helped build therapeutic rapport. When he presented his findings to colleagues, many dismissed the idea as unscientific or unprofessional. But gradually, others began experimenting with animal-assisted therapy, and the evidence became too consistent to ignore. Animals could facilitate healing in ways that traditional therapy alone sometimes couldn't. The physical health benefits of pet ownership have been documented across numerous studies. People who own pets, particularly dogs, tend to have lower blood pressure and cholesterol levels. They recover faster from serious illnesses like heart attacks and strokes. They visit doctors less frequently and use less medication. Some of these effects are due to increased physical activity. Dogs need walks, but studies that control for exercise levels still show health benefits from pet ownership, suggesting that the companionship itself has protective effects. One particularly striking study followed heart attack survivors over the course of a year. Those who owned dogs had a survival rate significantly higher than non-dog owners, even when factors like exercise, social support from humans, and disease severity were accounted for. The researchers suggested that the stress-reducing effects of pet ownership, combined with the routine and purpose that caring for an animal provides, contributed to better outcomes. For mental health, the benefits are equally impressive. Pet owners report lower rates of depression and anxiety. People with serious mental health conditions, from depression to PTSD to schizophrenia, often find that caring for a pet provides structure, purpose, and a source of unconditional support during difficult periods. The act of caring for another living being, of being needed and depended upon, can be profoundly meaningful for people struggling with feelings of worthlessness or hopelessness. The companionship that pets provide is particularly valuable in combating loneliness, which research increasingly recognizes as a significant health risk comparable to smoking or obesity. Lonely people have higher rates of cardiovascular disease, cognitive decline, and mortality. Pets provide constant companionship, a presence in the home that transforms empty spaces into inhabited ones. For elderly people living alone, for people who work from home, for anyone isolated by circumstance or choice, a pet can be the difference between loneliness and companionship. But pets do more than just provide company. They facilitate social connections between humans. Dog owners, for instance, have more casual social interactions during walks than people walking alone. Dogs serve as social icebreakers, giving strangers a reason to initiate conversation. These brief social interactions, what sociologists call weak ties, contribute significantly to well-being and feelings of community belonging. Cat owners, though they may not walk their pets, often connect with other cat enthusiasts online and in person, building communities around shared interests. For children, growing up with pets offers specific developmental benefits. Children with pets show higher empathy, better social skills, and increased self-esteem. They learn responsibility through caring for another living being. They experience the full cycle of life, from the joy of a new pet to the eventual grief of loss, which can help develop emotional resilience. Children with autism spectrum disorders often connect more easily with animals than with humans, and animal-assisted therapy has shown promise in improving social skills and reducing anxiety in autistic children. The presence of pets in educational settings has also proven beneficial. Programs that bring therapy dogs into schools have shown positive effects on children's reading skills. The children are more willing to read aloud to non-judgmental dogs than to peers or teachers, and on classroom behavior and anxiety levels. College campuses increasingly offer pet therapy sessions during stressful periods like finals, recognizing that brief interactions with friendly dogs can reduce student stress and improve mood. Equine-assisted therapy represents one of the most interesting developments in animal-assisted healing. Horses are large, powerful animals that require careful attention and respect. Working with horses, whether through riding, grooming, or ground exercises, demands presence and emotional regulation. People can't be distracted or emotionally reactive around horses without consequences. This makes horses particularly effective for treating trauma, anxiety, and emotional dysregulation. Veterans with PTSD, survivors of abuse, people struggling with addiction, many have found that working with horses helps them develop emotional awareness and regulation in ways traditional talk therapy hasn't. The therapeutic mechanism isn't entirely clear, but it likely involves the horse's sensitivity to human emotional states. Horses are prey animals with highly developed abilities to read body language and emotional cues, skills necessary for detecting predators. This makes them remarkably responsive to human emotions. A person who's anxious will find the horse becomes nervous. Someone who's calm and centered will find the horse relaxed and cooperative. This immediate feedback helps people become more aware of their emotional states and learn to regulate them. Service dogs represent another dimension of the healing relationship between humans and animals. These dogs are trained to perform specific tasks for people with disabilities, from guiding blind individuals to alerting deaf people to sounds to helping people with mobility impairments with daily tasks. But beyond their practical functions, service dogs provide companionship, security, and independence to their handlers. The relationship between a person and their service dog often becomes intensely close, a true partnership where each depends on the other. Psychiatric service dogs are trained to assist people with mental health conditions like PTSD, severe anxiety, or panic disorders. They can be trained to recognize signs of an approaching panic attack and respond by applying pressure or guiding their handler to a safe space. They provide grounding during dissociative episodes. They create a buffer between their handler and crowded or triggering environments. For veterans with combat-related PTSD, these dogs can mean the difference between being unable to leave home and re-engaging with the world. The concept of emotional support animals has become somewhat controversial, partly due to misuse and lack of regulation. But the core idea reflects a genuine therapeutic relationship. An emotional support animal doesn't need specialized training like a service dog, but provides comfort and stability to someone with a diagnosed mental health condition. The presence of the animal reduces symptoms and improves functioning. When used appropriately, emotional support animals can be genuinely helpful, providing the benefits of pet ownership in situations like housing or travel, where pets might otherwise be prohibited. Visiting therapy animal programs bring animals into hospitals, nursing homes, hospices, and other care facilities. These programs have documented effects on patient well-being: reduced blood pressure, decreased pain perception, improved mood, increased willingness to participate in physical therapy, and reduced anxiety before medical procedures. For people in institutional settings who may feel isolated from normal life, a visit from a friendly dog or cat can provide a moment of normalcy, comfort, and connection. Perhaps most remarkably, some animals can detect medical conditions in their owners. Dogs have been documented detecting seizures before they occur, possibly through subtle changes in their owner's scent or behavior that precede the seizure. Diabetic alert dogs can smell changes in blood sugar levels, and alert their owners to dangerous highs or lows before the person consciously recognizes symptoms. Some dogs appear able to detect certain cancers, responding to scent compounds produced by tumors. While the mechanisms aren't fully understood, the phenomenon is real and potentially life-saving. The healing power of pets isn't limitless or universal. Pet ownership isn't appropriate for everyone, and animals aren't substitutes for medical care or therapy when those are needed. The relationship requires commitment, resources, and capability. But for many people, across many situations, the presence of an animal companion contributes to healing, recovery, and well-being in ways that complement and sometimes exceed what human medicine alone can provide. You're sitting on your couch and your dog stands up, walks to the door, and looks back at you. The message is clear outside. No words needed, no elaborate gestures, just a look and position that you understand instantly. Or your cat sits by the empty food bowl, makes eye contact, and produces that particular meow, and you know exactly what's wanted. This everyday communication between humans and their pets is so ordinary that we rarely stop to consider how extraordinary it is. We're communicating across species barriers, understanding and being understood by creatures with entirely different cognitive structures, sensory experiences, and evolutionary histories. The study of animal communication has revealed that our pets are far more sophisticated communicators than we once assumed. They've developed ways to interact with humans that go beyond their natural communication with their own species. In some cases, they've essentially learned human communication patterns. In others, they've adapted their natural behaviors in ways that humans can understand. And humans, for our part, have become remarkably skilled at reading the subtle cues our pets provide. Let's start with dogs, the species that's spent the longest time adapting to human communication. Dogs possess an almost unique ability among animals to follow human pointing gestures. This might not seem remarkable until you learn that even chimpanzees, our closest genetic relatives with whom we share about 99% of our DNA, struggle with this task. Young chimps raised by humans, given extensive exposure to human gestures, still don't spontaneously follow pointing the way dogs do. What makes this particularly interesting is that wolves, dogs' direct ancestors, also struggle with following human pointing. The ability isn't something dogs inherited from wolves. It's something that evolved during domestication, either through selection for dogs who could read human communicative signals, or as a byproduct of selection for other traits like reduced fear of humans. Either way, it represents a cognitive adaptation, specifically for interacting with humans. Dogs don't just follow pointing. They understand a range of human communicative gestures and expressions. Research has shown that dogs distinguish between happy and angry human faces, responding differently to each. They understand that humans use their eyes to see. They'll follow human gaze direction and take into account what humans can see when deciding whether to steal food. They recognize individual humans by sight, smell, and sound, and remember who has treated them well or poorly. Perhaps most remarkably, dogs appear to understand something about human communicative intent. In experiments where a human accidentally versus intentionally withholds food from a dog, dogs respond differently, showing less frustration when the withholding appears accidental. This suggests dogs have at least a basic understanding that humans have intentions, that their behaviors are goal-directed rather than random. The famous dog-tail wag is more complex than most people realize. Not all wags mean the same thing. Research has shown that dogs wag more to the right when they see something positive, their owner, for instance, and more to the left when seeing something potentially threatening. The speed, amplitude, and position of the wag all convey different meanings. A slow wag with the tail in a low position signals uncertainty or submission. A fast, high wag with a relaxed body indicates excitement and friendliness. A stiff, high tail wag might precede aggression. But here's something fascinating. Dogs can read these tail wag subtleties in other dogs, and they respond accordingly. When shown videos of other dogs wagging their tails more to the right versus left, dogs showed different physiological responses, more relaxed for right-biased wags, more stressed for left-biased wags. This suggests the asymmetry in tail wagging reflects something about the dog's emotional state, likely related to brain hemispheric activation, and other dogs have evolved to read these signals. Dogs also use vocalizations in sophisticated ways. The bark is actually relatively rare in wolves. Adult wolves rarely bark, but dogs bark frequently and in different contexts. Research suggests that dogs have essentially developed barking as a form of communication specifically for humans. Different bark types convey different messages: alarm barks, play barks, attention-seeking barks, frustrated barks. And humans, even those without extensive dog experience, can identify what different barks mean with better than chance accuracy. Cats, despite their reputation for inscrutability, are also sophisticated communicators. The meow is particularly interesting because adult cats rarely meow at each other. In cat-to-cat communication, meows are primarily used by kittens to get their mother's attention. Adult cats communicate with each other through body language, scent marking, and various non-meow vocalizations like growls, hisses, and chirps. But adult cats meow extensively to humans, suggesting they've adapted kitten-mother communication patterns for use with their human caregivers. Research has shown that cats adjust their meows based on context and desired outcome. The meow used when asking for food sounds different from the meow requesting to be let outside, which differs from the meow saying, "Pay attention to me." Some researchers have found that cats incorporate a frequency similar to a baby's cry into their urgent meows, essentially manipulating human responses by triggering our evolved sensitivity to infant distress calls. It's a clever adaptation that suggests cats understand something about how to effectively communicate with humans. Cat body language is subtle but rich with meaning. The position and movement of the tail communicate mood and intention. A tail held high with a slight curl at the end typically signals a friendly, confident cat. A puffed-up tail indicates fear or aggression. A tail swishing rapidly back and forth suggests agitation or excitement, very different from the friendly tail wag of a dog. Ears forward indicate interest or confidence. Ears flattened back signal fear or aggression. The slow blink, where a cat looks at you and deliberately closes and opens its eyes, is often interpreted as a sign of trust and affection. And some research suggests cats do respond positively when humans slow blink back at them. The purr is one of the most mysterious aspects of cat communication. While we typically associate purring with contentment, cats also purr when stressed, injured, or dying. Research suggests purring might have a self-soothing function, with the vibration frequency potentially promoting healing. But cats also clearly use purring to communicate with humans, often purring to solicit attention or food. Some cats develop a solicitation purr that incorporates a higher frequency component, similar to the baby cry frequency in some meows, that humans find particularly difficult to ignore. Other pet species have their own communication repertoires. Rabbits thump their hind legs to signal alarm, a behavior they use both with other rabbits and with humans once they've bonded. Guinea pigs have an elaborate vocabulary of squeaks, purrs, chirps, and weeks, with the week, a loud, excited squeal, typically reserved for announcing that dinner time approaches. Birds, particularly parrots, can learn to use human words meaningfully, not just as mimicry, but as functional communication, requesting specific foods, asking for attention, even combining words in novel ways. But communication between humans and pets isn't just about pets learning human signals. Humans have become remarkably adept at reading animal communication too. Dog owners can accurately identify whether a bark is playful, aggressive, or fearful. Cat owners learned to distinguish between the "I'm hungry" meow and the "I want attention" meow. Horse owners read subtle changes in ear position, nostril flare, and body tension to understand their horse's emotional state. This mutual understanding represents a kind of pigeon language, a simplified communication system that allows species with different natural communication systems to interact effectively. Neither species can fully understand the other's complete communication repertoire. Dogs don't grasp the full complexity of human language, and humans don't perceive all the information dogs convey through scent. But we've both learned enough of each other's signals to coordinate behavior and express basic needs and emotions. The development of this cross-species communication likely played a crucial role in domestication. Animals that could read human signals and make themselves understood to humans would have had advantages in human environments. Humans who could understand and predict animal behavior would have been more successful at incorporating animals into their lives. Over thousands of generations, both sides got better at the communication game. Modern technology is opening new possibilities for understanding animal communication. Researchers are using machine learning to analyze animal vocalizations, identifying patterns, and potentially decoding meaning in ways that exceed human perception. Projects like the Earth Species Project aim to use AI to translate animal communication, potentially allowing us to understand what our pets are saying with greater precision. While we're far from having actual translation devices, we're making progress in understanding the complexity and sophistication of animal communication. What emerges from all this research is a picture of our pets as genuine communication partners. They're not simply responding to conditioning or learning to perform behaviors for rewards, though that's part of it. They're actively trying to communicate with us, using signals they've adapted or developed specifically for interacting with humans. And we're responding in kind, learning their languages, reading their signals, creating a shared communication system that allows us to live together, cooperate, and form the bonds that make pets such important parts of our lives. There's a moment in the mid-19th century when the diversity of dogs explodes into a form recognizable today. Before this period, dogs certainly varied by region and purpose. There were herding dogs, hunting dogs, guard dogs, each shaped by their work and local breeding practices over centuries. But they weren't organized into formal breeds with written standards, registries, and show competitions. Then something shifted, driven by Victorian obsessions with classification, purity, and control. And within a few decades, the modern purebred dog was created. The year 1873 marks a turning point when the Kennel Club was founded in Britain, the first organization dedicated to creating and maintaining standards for dog breeds. Other countries quickly followed. The American Kennel Club in 1884, breed clubs across Europe, and eventually worldwide. These organizations established written breed standards describing ideal physical characteristics, temperament, and sometimes working ability for each recognized breed. They maintained stud books tracking lineages, essentially creating closed gene pools where only dogs already registered as members of a breed could produce registered offspring. This system had profound effects on dog genetics and health. Within a few generations, dog diversity that had developed gradually over thousands of years became crystallized into distinct breeds with standardized appearances. A German Shepherd from Germany looked essentially identical to one from America. Bulldogs, beagles, border collies, each breed became recognizable at a glance anywhere in the world. But this standardization came with costs. Breeding for specific appearances often meant selecting for exaggerated physical features that compromised health. Bulldogs were bred for increasingly flat faces, shorter legs, and more compact bodies until many can't breathe properly, can't reproduce naturally, and have severely shortened lifespans. German Shepherds were bred for sloped backs that often lead to hip dysplasia and mobility problems. Many giant breeds have been selected for such large size that their hearts and joints struggle under the strain, leading to lifespans tragically short compared to their medium-sized ancestors. The emphasis on purebred dogs also meant dramatic reduction in genetic diversity within breeds. Breeding from a limited number of founding animals, combined with intense selection for specific traits and avoidance of outcrossing to other breeds, created genetic bottlenecks. Many breeds trace back to just a handful of founding dogs, sometimes as few as a dozen individuals. This makes them vulnerable to genetic diseases that can spread rapidly through the limited gene pool. Golden retrievers, for instance, have extraordinarily high rates of cancer, with some estimates suggesting over 60% will develop cancer in their lifetimes. Cavalier King Charles Spaniels suffer from a condition called syringomyelic, where their skulls are too small for their brains, causing severe pain. Dalmatians have a genetic predisposition to deafness and urinary stones. Nearly every purebred dog has breed-specific health issues that result directly from the limited gene pool and selection for appearance over health. The show ring became the primary driver of breed development, and unfortunately, show standards often rewarded extreme features. The English Bulldog's transformation is particularly striking. Historical photographs from the late 1800s show relatively athletic dogs with longer muzzles and legs. Compare those to modern show champions, who can barely walk, struggle to breathe, and require artificial insemination and cesarean sections to reproduce. This represents selection for traits that actively harm the dog's health and quality of life. Some breeds have been created entirely within the past century through deliberate crossing of other breeds, and then careful selection to fix desired traits. The Australian Labradoodle, originally bred to create a hypoallergenic guide dog by crossing Labrador retrievers with poodles, spawned an entire industry of designer dogs. Some of these crosses aim to address health problems in purebreds by introducing genetic diversity. The Puggle, a pug-beagle cross, tends to have fewer respiratory problems than purebred pugs, but others were simply marketed as trendy combinations, with little regard for health or temperament. The consequences of purebred dog breeding practices have prompted increasing criticism from veterinarians, animal welfare advocates, and geneticists. Several countries have passed laws prohibiting breeding practices that cause suffering. Norway's Animal Welfare Act was interpreted in 2022 to effectively ban breeding of bulldogs and Cavalier King Charles Spaniels in their current forms, arguing that producing animals with inherent suffering violates animal welfare principles. The UK's Kennel Club has modified some breed standards to reduce emphasis on extreme features, though implementation remains controversial. There's a growing movement toward breeding healthier dogs, emphasizing genetic diversity, functional ability, and health testing over appearance. Some breeders have begun outcrossing to related breeds to introduce genetic diversity, creating healthier dogs that may not perfectly match breed standards but have better quality of life. The philosophy is shifting slowly, from pure breeding to responsible breeding that prioritizes animal welfare. Mixed-breed dogs, often called mutts or mongrels, have historically been considered less valuable than purebreds, but they typically have significant health advantages. With genes drawn from diverse sources, mixed breeds experience what geneticists call hybrid vigor, better overall health, and longer lifespans compared to purebreds. Studies have shown mixed-breed dogs live on average 1.5 years longer than purebreds, and have lower rates of many genetic diseases. The situation with cats is somewhat similar, but less extreme. Cat breeds are more recent creations than dog breeds, with most formal breeding beginning in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The number of recognized cat breeds is smaller, around 70 compared to over 300 dog breeds, and the majority of pet cats worldwide are mixed breed rather than purebred. However, cat breeding has still produced health problems. Persian cats, bred for extremely flat faces, suffer from breathing difficulties, eye problems, and dental issues. Scottish fold cats, bred for their distinctive folded ears caused by a cartilage defect, often develop painful arthritis because the same genetic mutation affects cartilage throughout their body. Munchkin cats, bred for extremely short legs, may have mobility issues and spinal problems. The ethics of selective breeding raise difficult questions. Humans have shaped domestic animals for thousands of years, and we've created diversity that wouldn't exist without our intervention. Many breeds were developed for specific purposes and perform those functions remarkably well. Border collies excel at herding, bloodhounds at tracking, and retrievers at retrieving game. Their abilities bring them fulfillment, and their partnerships with humans can be deeply rewarding for both. But when breeding prioritizes appearance over function and health, when dogs can't breathe, run, or reproduce naturally because of how we've shaped them, we've crossed an ethical line. The animal suffering created by pursuing breed standards that emphasize extreme or unhealthy features can't be justified by tradition or aesthetic preference. The future of dog and cat breeding is uncertain. Some advocate for ending purebred breeding entirely, allowing all dogs and cats to be mixed-breed mutts. Others argue that responsible breeding, with emphasis on health, genetic diversity, and functional ability, can preserve the positive aspects of breeds while eliminating the suffering. Genetic technologies like DNA testing for disease markers and genomic selection could allow breeders to maintain breed characteristics while systematically reducing disease prevalence. What seems clear is that the Victorian model of closed stud books, extreme selection for appearance, and tolerance of suffering in pursuit of breed standards needs to change. Dogs and cats have been our companions for thousands of years, and we owe them better than producing animals whose lives are shortened and whose health is compromised because of how we think they should look. The relationship between humans and pets should be based on mutual benefit and welfare, not on our desire for particular appearances at any cost. The way we think about pets, what we consider appropriate animal companions, how we treat them, and what roles they play in our lives varies dramatically across cultures. What seems natural and obvious in one society might be incomprehensible or even offensive in another. These differences reveal how deeply culture shapes our relationships with animals, and how the modern Western model of pet keeping, while increasingly globalized, is far from universal or inevitable. Let's start with a fundamental difference in how various cultures categorize animals. In much of the Western world, particularly in North America and Europe, there's a clear division between pets, animals kept for companionship, and other categories like livestock or working animals. Dogs and cats are pets. Pigs and cows are livestock. This categorization seems natural to people raised in these cultures, but it's actually quite arbitrary. In many parts of Asia, this boundary is drawn differently or doesn't exist as clearly. In rural China, Vietnam, and Korea, dogs might serve multiple roles simultaneously: guard animals, companions, and in some regions, food animals. This creates cognitive dissonance for Westerners who view dogs exclusively as companions, but from these cultures' perspectives, different individual dogs can have different purposes, and the categories aren't mutually exclusive. The dog meat trade in parts of Asia has been a source of international controversy, with Western animal rights activists campaigning against the practice. But these campaigns often fail to acknowledge the cultural complexity involved. In South Korea, for instance, attitudes toward dogs as food are rapidly changing, particularly among younger generations who increasingly view dogs as companions rather than livestock. The practice is declining not primarily because of Western pressure, but because of internal cultural shifts driven by urbanization, economic development, and changing values. Meanwhile, Westerners who keep chickens as backyard pets face similar cognitive dissonance from the other direction. In many cultures, chickens are purely food animals, and the idea of keeping them as companions, giving them names, mourning their deaths, seems bizarre. Yet American and European chicken keepers describe genuine bonds with their birds, individual personalities, and emotional connections. The boundaries between pet, livestock, and food are culturally constructed, not naturally occurring categories. In India, the relationship with animals is shaped profoundly by Hindu and Jain religious principles, emphasizing nonviolence and respect for all life. Cows are sacred, protected, and often allowed to wander freely through streets in ways that would be unthinkable in Western cities. While not exactly pets in the Western sense, these animals occupy a privileged position in society, reflecting deep cultural and religious values. Dogs and cats are kept as companions, but attitudes toward street animals differ from Western norms. Large populations of free-roaming dogs and cats coexist with human communities, fed and tolerated, but not necessarily owned. Islamic cultures have complex relationships with dogs that differ significantly from Western norms. Traditional Islamic jurisprudence considers dogs ritually impure, with contact requiring washing before prayer. This doesn't mean Islam forbids keeping dogs entirely. Working dogs for herding, guarding, or hunting are generally accepted, but dogs as indoor companions are less common. However, attitudes vary across the Muslim world. In more secular or westernized Muslim-majority countries, pet dogs are increasingly common, while in more traditional societies, cats are preferred as companions because they're considered ritually clean. This preference for cats in Islamic cultures has deep historical roots. The Prophet Muhammad was reportedly fond of cats, and numerous hadith, sayings, and actions attributed to him show cats being treated with kindness and respect. This has contributed to cats being widely accepted and cared for throughout the Islamic world. Cat populations in cities from Istanbul to Cairo are substantial, with community cats fed and protected by residents even if not formally owned. In Japan, cultural attitudes toward pets reflect broader Japanese values about nature, relationships, and responsibility. The concept of kawaii, cuteness, deeply influences Japanese pet culture, with small, cute pets particularly prized. But Japanese pet keeping also emphasizes serious responsibility. The process of adopting a pet in Japan often involves extensive screening, contracts, and ongoing check-ins, reflecting the cultural emphasis on thoroughly fulfilling obligations once they're undertaken. Japanese culture also has unique pet-related practices that seem unusual to Western eyes. Pet cafes, where customers pay to spend time with cats, dogs, rabbits, or even more exotic animals like owls or hedgehogs, are popular in Japanese cities where small apartments and busy lifestyles make pet ownership difficult. These cafes offer the benefits of animal companionship without the full-time commitment. To Westerners, this might seem like commodifying animals, but from a Japanese perspective, it's a practical solution that allows people to experience animal companionship while respecting the constraints of modern urban life. In many indigenous cultures around the world, the distinction between pets, working animals, and wild animals is understood quite differently than in Western industrial societies. Traditional relationships with animals often emphasized reciprocity and respect rather than ownership. Animals might be companions, helpers, and even spiritual teachers without being owned in the Western sense. Arctic peoples have kept dogs for transportation and hunting for thousands of years. These dogs are working partners essential for survival, but they're also companions with whom mushers develop deep bonds. The relationship isn't the same as a Western pet owner with a dog who's never worked, but it's no less meaningful. The dogs are valued, cared for, and mourned when they die, even as they serve crucial practical functions. Australian Aboriginal peoples traditionally didn't keep pets in the Western sense. Though dingoes sometimes lived alongside human communities, in relationships of mutual benefit. Today, many Aboriginal communities keep dogs, but conceptions of dog ownership often differ from Western norms, with dogs having more freedom to roam and less intensive individual ownership. This creates tensions when Western animal welfare standards, which emphasize individual ownership and control, are applied in indigenous communities with different cultural practices. In parts of Africa, pets in the Western sense are relatively uncommon outside of westernized urban areas. Dogs and cats exist, certainly, but often as working or semi-feral animals rather than indoor companions. Economic factors play a role. Keeping indoor pets requires disposable income many people lack, but cultural factors matter too. In societies where human life itself is precarious, the idea of spending significant resources on animal companions can seem like an incomprehensible luxury. However, this is changing as middle classes grow in African cities. Urban Nigerians, Kenyans, and South Africans increasingly keep Western-style pets, particularly dogs. Pet stores, veterinary clinics, and dog training services are expanding. This represents a form of cultural globalization, with Western pet-keeping practices spreading alongside other aspects of Western consumer culture. Latin America shows enormous diversity in pet-keeping practices, reflecting the region's cultural complexity. In some areas, dogs roam relatively freely, fed by multiple households, belonging to the community rather than individuals. In others, Western-style individual pet ownership dominates. Mexico's Day of the Dead celebrations include honoring deceased pets, reflecting the integration of animal companions into spiritual and cultural practices. The globalization of Western pet culture raises interesting questions. Is it cultural imperialism to promote Western pet-keeping norms worldwide? Or is the spread of concern for animal welfare a positive development regardless of its Western origins? These questions don't have simple answers. Certainly, some traditional practices cause animal suffering that could be reduced through changing cultural norms. But Western pet culture also has its own problems, from overbreeding of purebred animals to the environmental impact of pet food production to the abandonment of animals when they become inconvenient. What's becoming clear is that a single global pet culture is emerging, particularly in urban areas worldwide. But it's not simply Western culture spreading unchanged. Instead, it's a hybrid culture that incorporates elements from various traditions. Japanese kawaii aesthetics influence pet fashion worldwide. Middle Eastern and Asian cat-keeping traditions inform how people relate to community cats. Indigenous perspectives on reciprocal relationships with animals offer alternatives to pure ownership models. The future of human-pet relationships globally will likely continue blending cultural traditions as urbanization, economic development, and global communication create new norms. Understanding these cultural variations reminds us that our own pet-keeping practices aren't natural or inevitable. They're culturally constructed, shaped by history, religion, economics, and values. And that means they can change, hopefully in directions that prioritize both human well-being and animal welfare, across all the diverse cultures that share this planet. There's a pet store near you right now, that much is almost certain. Inside, you'll find an array of products that would have been incomprehensible to pet owners a century ago. Gourmet pet foods with ingredients like wild-caught salmon and organic vegetables. Toys specifically designed to provide mental stimulation. Beds orthopedically designed for aging joints. Clothes for dogs. GPS tracking collars. Automated litter boxes with Wi-Fi connectivity. The pet industry has grown from basic provisions like food and simple collars into a global behemoth worth over $200 billion annually. This transformation reflects changing attitudes toward pets, but it's also actively shaped those attitudes. The pet industry doesn't just respond to what people want for their animals. It creates desires, establishes new norms, and transforms what it means to be a responsible pet owner. Understanding the business of pets reveals how commercial interests and genuine love for animals have become thoroughly entangled in modern pet keeping. Let's start with pet food, the industry's largest sector. For most of human history, pet feeding was simple. Dogs and cats ate scraps from human meals, supplemented with whatever they could hunt. When commercial pet food first appeared in the mid-1800s, it was basic, hard biscuits made from meat byproducts and grains. James Spratt created the first commercial dog food in 1860s London, marketing it as a convenient alternative to table scraps. The industry remained relatively small until after World War II. Then several factors converged. Rising incomes allowed spending on pet care. Urbanization meant fewer families produced their own food and had fewer scraps. And most crucially, pet food companies launched sophisticated marketing campaigns. They didn't just sell food. They sold the idea that dogs and cats needed specially formulated nutrition that owners couldn't provide through scraps alone. This wasn't entirely wrong. Dogs and cats do have specific nutritional requirements, and well-formulated commercial foods can provide complete nutrition more reliably than random table scraps. But the industry also pathologized the traditional feeding practices that had sustained dogs and cats for thousands of years. Suddenly, feeding your dog leftovers wasn't just old-fashioned, it was irresponsible, potentially harmful. Today's pet food market is incredibly sophisticated and highly profitable. Premium and natural pet foods command prices comparable to human food, marketed with the same health-conscious language used for human products. Grain-free, organic, single-protein source, human-grade ingredients. The irony is that some of these marketing trends, like grain-free dog food, have been questioned by veterinary nutritionists. A spike in heart disease cases in dogs was linked to grain-free diets, though the exact mechanism remains debated. The premium pet food market also reflects anthropomorphization, treating pets like human family members. If we eat organic, free-range chicken, shouldn't our dogs? If we avoid processed foods, shouldn't our cats? This mindset drives premium pet food sales, but it's worth noting that dogs and cats have different nutritional needs than humans. What's healthy for us isn't necessarily optimal for them. Veterinary care represents another massive sector of the pet industry. Veterinary medicine has advanced dramatically, now offering treatments that were once available only for humans. Chemotherapy for cancer, dialysis for kidney failure, orthopedic surgery, even organ transplants. These advances are genuine achievements that can extend and improve pet lives. But they're also expensive, often costing thousands of dollars, creating difficult decisions for owners about how much to spend. And when treatment becomes more about owners' emotional needs than pets' well-being. This has driven the growth of pet insurance, a relatively new industry that's expanding rapidly. Pet insurance works like human health insurance. Owners pay monthly premiums, and the insurance covers significant medical expenses. It can make expensive treatments accessible to middle-class pet owners who couldn't otherwise afford them. But it also changes the calculus of pet ownership, encouraging more intensive medical interventions and potentially extending medical care beyond what's comfortable for the animal. The grooming industry has grown from basic bathing and nail trimming to elaborate services rivaling human salons. Professional grooming can cost hundreds of dollars per visit, with services including specialized shampoos, blow-drying, styling, teeth brushing, even coloring. For some breeds, particularly those with high-maintenance coats, regular professional grooming is genuinely necessary. But the industry has also created expectations that weren't necessary or common even a generation ago. Pet accessories and toys represent pure consumer culture applied to animals. Dogs don't need clothes, with rare exceptions for small or hairless breeds in cold climates, but the pet clothing market is substantial. Costumes for holidays, practical jackets, even luxury fashion items with designer labels exist for dogs. This is entirely about owner preference and enjoyment, which isn't necessarily wrong, but it represents pets as accessories to human lifestyle rather than animals with their own needs. The toy market is more defensible. Mental and physical stimulation are genuinely important for pet well-being, particularly for intelligent, active animals living in relatively unstimulating indoor environments. Puzzle toys that dispense treats, toys that mimic prey animals for cats, durable chew toys for dogs, these can significantly improve quality of life. But the market has also expanded into excessive territory, with some pet owners spending hundreds on toys that get ignored while their pet plays with a cardboard box. Pet services have proliferated into niches that would have seemed absurd decades ago. Pet hotels offer luxury boarding with private rooms, TV, and webcam access so owners can check on their pets. Dog daycare provides socialization and exercise during owners' work hours. Professional dog walking services, pet sitting, even pet photography and pet psychics exist as commercial services. Some of these address genuine needs in a world where both adults in a household work full-time. Others cater to affluent owners treating their pets as child substitutes or status symbols. The pet industry has also driven trends in breeding and acquisition. Pet stores, particularly large chains, created markets for puppies and kittens, often sourced from large-scale breeding operations, puppy mills, with questionable animal welfare standards. Public awareness of these conditions has grown, and many jurisdictions now ban pet stores from selling dogs and cats from commercial breeders, allowing only rescue animals to be sold. This represents the pet welfare movement successfully changing commercial practices, though enforcement varies. Online marketplaces have transformed how people acquire pets. Websites and apps connect buyers with breeders, facilitators, and individuals rehoming pets. This increased access and choice, but also made impulse pet acquisition easier and created new avenues for unethical breeders and scammers. The convenience of browsing puppies online like shopping for shoes can encourage treating living creatures as commodities. The environmental impact of the pet industry is substantial and growing. Pet food production contributes significantly to greenhouse gas emissions, land use, and water consumption. A study suggested that feeding cats and dogs in the U.S. creates the equivalent of about 64 million tons of CO2 annually, roughly the impact of 13 million cars. Plastic waste from pet products, from food packaging to disposable poop bags to toys, adds to environmental burden. This has prompted some pet owners to seek more sustainable options. Foods with insect protein or plant-based ingredients to reduce environmental impact, biodegradable waste bags, toys made from recycled materials. Some companies now market specifically to environmentally conscious pet owners. Whether these alternatives can scale to significantly reduce the industry's environmental footprint remains to be seen. The pet industry's growth has created employment and economic activity, supporting millions of jobs worldwide. It's also funded veterinary research and care improvements that genuinely benefit animals. But it's also driven overconsumption, created unrealistic expectations about pet ownership costs, and sometimes prioritized profit over animal welfare. The challenge going forward is maintaining the genuine benefits the industry provides, while reducing exploitation, environmental harm, and the treatment of living creatures as consumer products. As the industry continues evolving, some trends seem likely to accelerate. Personalization through data, with smart collars and feeding systems tracking pet health metrics. Subscription services delivering customized food and products. Increased veterinary specialization offering advanced treatments, and continued premiumization with luxury pet products marketed to wealthy owners. Whether this serves pets' genuine welfare or primarily serves human desires and commercial interests depends on how consciously we navigate the increasingly complex marketplace of pet ownership. Imagine a world 20, 30, 50 years from now. What will our relationships with pets look like? Will we still keep dogs and cats in much the same way, or will technology, ethics, and changing circumstances fundamentally transform pet keeping? The future of pets isn't written yet, but current trends and emerging technologies suggest some fascinating and sometimes unsettling possibilities. Let's start with technology, which is already transforming pet keeping in ways that would have seemed like science fiction recently. Smart collars track pets' location via GPS, monitor activity levels, and can even track vital signs like heart rate. Some include cameras, allowing owners to see what their pets see. Automated feeders dispense precise portions on schedule, controlled via smartphone apps. Self-cleaning litter boxes, video monitoring systems, even treat dispensing cameras that let owners remotely interact with pets. All these exist today. But we're approaching more significant technological interventions. Researchers are developing brain-computer interfaces that could potentially allow direct communication between humans and animals. While the technology is primitive and decades from practical application, the concept isn't science fiction. If we could understand what pets are thinking and experiencing, if they could communicate their needs and preferences directly, how would that change our relationships with them? The ethical implications are profound. Would pets with the ability to communicate want to remain pets? If a dog could tell you it would rather spend its days differently than you're providing, would you be obligated to accommodate those preferences? Or would communication actually deepen bonds by removing misunderstandings and allowing genuine consensus about the relationship? Artificial intelligence and robotics offer another direction for future pet companionship. Robot pets already exist, marketed particularly to elderly people who can't care for living animals. These devices respond to touch, make sounds, and provide some of the comfort of a pet without the care requirements. Early models were simple, but advancing AI is creating robot companions with more sophisticated responses, learning capabilities, and apparent personality. For some people, particularly those in situations where living pets aren't feasible, robot companions could provide genuine benefits. Research has shown that even interactions with simple robot pets can reduce loneliness and improve mood in nursing home residents. But robot pets also raise questions about what we value in the human-animal bond. Is it simply the comfort of interaction, which robots might provide, or is there something essential about the relationship with a living creature that machines can't replicate? Genetic engineering offers perhaps the most controversial technological frontier in pet keeping. Scientists have already created glow-in-the-dark fish, genetically modified to produce fluorescent proteins, sold as novelty pets. Similar modifications could be applied to other species. But genetic engineering could go far beyond aesthetic changes. Imagine hypoallergenic cats engineered to not produce the proteins that trigger allergies, or dogs engineered for extended lifespans, addressing one of the most painful aspects of pet ownership. More dramatically, we might engineer pets for enhanced intelligence, creating dogs or cats with cognitive abilities approaching human levels. This sounds appealing until you consider the ethics. Would a highly intelligent animal want to be a pet? Would it be ethical to create a being capable of sophisticated thought, and then expect it to live a life circumscribed by human convenience? The closer we bring animal intelligence to human intelligence, the more problematic traditional pet relationships become. De-extinction technology might allow resurrection of extinct species, including extinct breeds or even wild species that could potentially be domesticated. The Quagga project has used selective breeding to recreate an extinct zebra subspecies appearance. Similar approaches might restore extinct dog breeds or create new species from ancient DNA. but just because we can doesn't mean we should. The welfare implications of creating animals for human enjoyment without considering whether they can thrive in the modern world are significant. Climate change will likely reshape pet keeping in practical ways. As temperatures rise and extreme weather becomes more common, outdoor pet keeping may become more challenging. Heat waves can be deadly for dogs, particularly breeds with respiratory issues. Conversely, cold snaps in regions that aren't traditionally cold can threaten animals kept outdoors. This may accelerate the trend toward indoor pet keeping and drive demand for temperature-controlled spaces. Environmental concerns about pet ownership's impact are also growing. The carbon footprint of pet food, particularly meat-based products, is substantial. This might drive innovation in alternative protein sources, insect-based pet foods, lab-grown meat, or nutritionally complete plant-based options. Early versions of these alternatives exist but remain niche. Whether pet owners will accept them widely remains uncertain, but environmental pressure may eventually make them standard. Urbanization will continue shaping what kinds of pets people keep and how they keep them. As more humans live in cities, often in small apartments, large dogs become less practical. This might shift preferences toward smaller pets, cats, rabbits, or even smaller species like hamsters or fish. Urban pet keeping also demands better waste management solutions, quieter pets who won't disturb neighbors, and animals that adapt well to limited space. Some cities are developing innovative approaches to urban pet keeping. Dog parks and pet-friendly spaces are becoming standard in urban planning. Some apartment complexes include pet amenities like washing stations and play areas. Public transportation systems are becoming more pet-friendly. These adaptations recognize that pets are here to stay even in dense urban environments, and cities need to accommodate them. The ethical animal welfare movement will likely intensify, potentially leading to stricter regulations on breeding, pet sales, and keeping of exotic animals. Some countries have already banned specific breeds or breeding practices that cause suffering. This trend may expand, with more breeds being regulated or prohibited based on welfare concerns. Buying pets might require licensing demonstrating knowledge and capability, similar to driver's licenses. The exotic pet trade faces particular pressure. Keeping wild-caught animals as pets contributes to species decline and often involves poor welfare. Tigers, primates, parrots, reptiles, all are traded internationally with varying legality and ethics. Growing recognition that wild animals generally don't thrive in captivity, no matter how well-intentioned the owner, may lead to increased restrictions on exotic pet keeping. However, some exotic species do adapt well to captivity and are bred domestically for the pet trade. The line between acceptable and unacceptable exotic pets will remain debated, but the trend toward restricting species that don't thrive in home environments seems likely to continue. The goal would be allowing people to keep animals that can genuinely thrive as pets, while protecting species and individual animals that can't. The concept of pet ownership itself may evolve. Some animal rights advocates argue that ownership is the wrong framework, that we should instead think of ourselves as guardians or companions to animals who have their own interests and rights. Some jurisdictions have already changed legal language from pet owner to guardian. While this might seem like semantics, language shapes how we think about relationships and responsibilities. If pets are recognized as having intrinsic interests and possibly rights, this could transform legal and ethical obligations. Would it become illegal to leave dogs alone for extended periods? Would euthanizing healthy animals become prohibited? Would breeding animals be more heavily regulated based on the animal's interests rather than human preferences? These aren't hypothetical questions. They're being debated seriously in animal ethics and law. One likely future development is increasing personalization of pet care based on genetic and health data. Already, DNA tests for dogs can identify breed composition and genetic health risks. As these tests become cheaper and more comprehensive, they might become standard, allowing preventive care tailored to each animal's specific risks. Continuous health monitoring through wearable sensors could alert owners to developing problems before symptoms appear. This data-driven approach to pet care could significantly improve health outcomes, but also raises privacy concerns. If your pet's genetic data is collected by commercial companies, how is it used? Could pet insurance companies use genetic information to deny coverage? Could data about your pet's location and activities be sold to marketers? The same privacy concerns facing human data are emerging in pet care. Ultimately, the future of pets will be shaped by converging factors: technological capabilities, environmental constraints, ethical understanding, economic resources, and cultural values. The relationship between humans and pets has already changed dramatically just in the past century. It will likely change at least as much in the century ahead. What seems certain is that pets will remain important to humans. The bonds we form with animals address fundamental needs for companionship, purpose, and connection to nature that technology and urbanization haven't eliminated. Whether those bonds involve traditional dogs and cats, new species we haven't yet brought into our homes, or even synthetic companions that blur the line between living and machine, the desire for these relationships appears to be a constant of human nature. The challenge will be ensuring that as our relationships with pets evolve, we keep the animal's welfare and interests central. The best futures for pet keeping are those where both humans and animals benefit, where relationships are built on genuine mutual enrichment rather than human desire alone. If we can manage that as we navigate the ethical, practical, and technological complexities ahead, the ancient bond between humans and animals might strengthen rather than fray, even as it transforms into forms we can barely imagine today. Tonight, we've traveled through 15,000 years of human history, tracing the remarkable journey of animals from wild creatures wary of our campfires to beloved companions sleeping in our beds. Through it all, one truth has emerged clearly. The relationship between humans and pets is one of the most remarkable partnerships in natural history. We're different species with different needs, different ways of experiencing the world, different evolutionary paths. Yet we've found ways to live together, to communicate across the species barrier, to form genuine emotional bonds that enrich both human and animal lives. This partnership has shaped us as much as we've shaped our animal companions, making us more capable of empathy, more connected to the natural world, more aware that consciousness and feeling and individual personality exist in forms quite different from our own. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the history and science of pets. If you're already drifting off, then our mission is complete. But if you're still awake, perhaps another deep dive through one of our previous episodes will carry you gently into slumber. Until we meet again in these quiet hours, may you find comfort in whatever companionship shares your space, whether furred, feathered, or scaled. And may you rest peacefully knowing you're never truly alone, as long as you open your heart to the creatures who have chosen to share their lives with yours.